Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Creating a Future-Focused Secure Firm, presented by Swizznet. Our presenters today are Wes Stillman, Sam Schumacher, and Mandy Sullivan from Swizznet. And before I turn the webinar over to our speakers and have them introduce themselves, I have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. CPE is available for this session. You must be present and engaged for 50 minutes, 50 minutes. To show your engagement by you answer the polling questions when they're posted, just like any other CPE webinar that you sit in on. So if you meet the minimum criteria, and that is you're in session for 50 minutes and you answer at least three of the polling questions, you will receive an email with a link to a short survey about the webinar, and that'll come in sometime this evening, first thing in the morning. Complete the survey, and again, it's like 3 questions. And your certificate will be emailed to you at the address that you used to register for this webinar. If you have any questions during the session, just please put them into the questions panel. And a link to the recording will be sent to you and can be found on our YouTube channel, normally within 48 hours. And when I say our YouTube channel, that is the Insightful Accountant YouTube channel. And once I turn the webinar over to our speakers, I will place the link to the YouTube channel in the chat, along with a copy of the slide deck. So, monitor your chat, you'll see it in there. So welcome, Wes, Sam, and Mandy. We certainly appreciate you guys taking some time and getting us up to speed on some technology as it's impacting firms. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Mandy Sullivan. I am the Executive Account Manager here at Swizznet. I deal with all of our accounting partners and strategic partnerships. Also with me is Sam Schumacher. He is our product manager. Sam has been with Swizznet for a little over 7 years. His experience with Swizznet has been leading the sales team as well as the customer support team prior to moving to his current role in the product department. And then also the main event with us is Wes Stillman. He is our Chief Innovation Officer. Prior to Wes joining Swizznet back in 2020, he was the CEO and founder of Right Size Solutions. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Mandy. Appreciate it. So let's jump in. A quick reminder for everybody: please, enter your questions, and we'll see if we can grab them as we go. Listen, guys, I think we all know there is significant change in our business today. MarketWatch, a little quote from them: the global digital transformation and accounting market is expected to rise at a significant rate starting in 2023. So what the heck's digital transformation anyway, right? Here's a textbook definition. Digital transformation takes a customer-driven, digital-first approach to all aspects of business. From its business models to customer experiences to processes and operations. Wow, seems like a mouthful. What it really means is your starting lineup, right? Your core apps, tech stack, whatever you want to call it, it is what is driving us, right? In terms of change in our business. Most things are moving out into the cloud today, which is causing a big change for us in our businesses. I think it's a critical time for accountants. Aside from software changing and software as a service, but there are numerous state and federal regulations that are hitting our business today. It's imperative, though, that we protect our clients' information and data, and thus protecting our clients and ourselves, right? Reducing risk in our businesses from cyber threats like data breaches and phishing emails. For any of you who have heard me here in the last couple of years, insurance policy requirements are also driving change and mandating that we put certain things in place in our business. And from state to state, penalties differ depending upon what happens with a breach in your business. I think we're going to kick this off quickly with our first poll question. Has your firm taken steps to meet the IRS 4557 requirements? So take a minute, go ahead and see if you can answer that. Hopefully most of you know something about 4557 today.
Yeah, well, while we give people a chance to answer that, Wes, I know you and I have talked a lot about future proofing and what that means for modern firms. And the thing that I find really interesting is the motivation for a lot of the regulatory recommendations and changes that we've seen come down the pipe. And a lot of it seems to be centered around the shift to SaaS, the software as a service model. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that. It is exactly what we're kind of talking about here to start with. If you can go find all of your CRM and starting lineup software and get it loaded on a server in your closet today, I would suggest you're probably using older software. So it's not because we necessarily wanted it to change or mandated it be changed. It just the industry itself has changed. So absolutely, everything has moved out to the cloud. Pretty interesting survey, Sam. Are you seeing the results?
Yeah, we're going to talk more about survey results in a couple of slides here, but it looks like 50% of the respondents on today's poll have taken the steps necessary to meet the 4557 requirements. And, that number is almost identical to the numbers that we saw when we polled all of our accounting clients. So we'll talk about some of those areas. But I think what we were just talking about leads perfectly into this whole idea of accounting industry and the evolution that has taken place.
Yeah, absolutely. We 4557. It seems suggestions is its main point, right, Sam? I think we've seen this before, right? As many of you may know, RightSize started in the wealth management space. And several years ago, we saw this change, the exact same type of change start to take place. And it's because the software and the technology was driving risk in the SEC regulated firms that were out there. And so we started seeing some of these same suggestions pop up, 8+ years ago. And that evolution hasn't stopped really since 2015. It continues today in the wealth management space, and we're starting to see that change happen, in this space, the accounting space. No doubt about it. Accountants have already, transitioned throughout the years, and some of those changes we've seen is, as we've mentioned already, digital transformation, but technology and being able to secure access, because some of our workforce has changed, right? Remote workforce. It used to be we all walked into the office and had a key and sat down at our desk and relatively secure. Today we have that hybrid workforce that's out. We've watched ourselves move from paper ledgers to accounting software to really fulfilling that IT role, right? As an accountant, right? We had to fill a lot of things throughout the years, and it wasn't terribly difficult to do that as compared to today. We've seen that burden really increase, and the complexity of what you need to know and how to set that up has really truly become much more complex than it ever was. So to me, it's time to work with people that not only understand your industry, but also understand security and technology as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it kind of speaks to the fact that the threat perimeter, as we see it being talked about in trade publications and in technical articles about risk, it's that threat perimeter that used to be those four walls is now extended into our employees' homes and their cars and on their cell phones. So it's definitely changed that landscape pretty drastically throughout that evolution.
Yeah, no doubt. I know you and Mandy both got to get out amongst everybody at a couple of places, Appy Camp and QuickBooks Connect and some of the surveys. So, Mandy, Sam, please share some of those experiences.
Yeah, so we've been really fortunate over the last couple of years to be able to speak with not only a ton of our existing clients, but also with other accounting professionals through our relationships. And most recently, we did participate in a retreat for educators in the community, and those conversations went even deeper, and we were able to learn so much from the insights that were shared with us. And then at QB Connect, anyone that hasn't gone or doesn't go regularly, totally recommend it. It's just such an incredible show. We loved being able to follow up on those conversations and listen in on those sessions that are really touching the accounting industry and touching on the challenges that they're starting to face. And so I want to just, Mandy, if you're good with it, I'll share a couple of the results from our recent survey, and then let you share your thoughts about all this. So we surveyed all of our accounting clients, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of them, and we got a ton of responses. And what I found really interesting was that when it came to three really critical areas, we saw less than 50% were able to say that, yes, in fact, they had taken the necessary steps. And so one of those was multi-factor authentication, which we know is just critical on all of your business systems and applications. Wes, I know you could talk for hours about MFA and not only why it's important, but why it's not imperviable to attacks as well. But just because it's not not the perfect answer, doesn't mean it shouldn't be turned on everywhere you can turn it on. But only about 47% of our firms could say that they were in fact leveraging MFA everywhere possible. And then of our tax clients that really are required to have a WISP, that written information security plan, we only got a 41% yes response rate, which, the 4557 now, that actually is a requirement. It's not a recommendation. That's absolutely a requirement. And that's part of that PTIN application. And then of the awareness and training. So when it comes to strengthening the first line of defense for firms, and that's our people, really educating our people, right? Only 41% again were able to say yes, they were educating their teams. And so that was really insightful for me, and I think gave us a lot of really valuable information so that we can have more informed conversations about where those common weaknesses tend to show up. Mandy?
Yeah, Sam, I would absolutely agree with you. I think one of the things that I found the most interesting with talking, especially at the leaders and teachers at Happy Hour Camp, was that some of our the accounting firms are having problems finding workforce here in the States and are having to outsource their staff to overseas, and they're really concerned about making sure that they have the proper security measures put in place and what needs to be put in place to make sure that their clients' data is secure, but they also have to be able to get the staff that they need to get the work done. And that one was really eye-opening for me. That was the first time that I've really heard of that. And I couldn't believe how many firms are going more to outsourcing overseas.
I love that you brought that up, because it really highlights that this evolution is ever changing. I mean, we went from people working in the office to our hybrid workforces where, it was all of our same employees, to now we really are going more globally with our hybrid nature.
Well, and just to point out, if it wasn't for the evolution of the technology and the software as a service based around cloud technology, we'd never be able to do that.
So very true, but that opens us up to new risks, doesn't it, Wes?
It absolutely does. Wow, what a great transition, Sam. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things we can do, right? Let's get into the meat of this a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we know that the IRS has put forth the 4557 and their security 6. So this looks relatively unscary at the surface. So we've got our 6 bullet points. Face value, pretty simple. We're talking about protecting endpoints. We're talking about firewalls. We're talking about multi-factor and backups and all the way down into those virtual private networks. But I think that when we dig in a little deeper and we start to get into the nitty gritty, things can look a little more confusing and complicated to implement. Wes, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, unfortunately. So 4557 is built around the NIST framework, okay? NIST, National Institute of Standards for Technology. It's big, it's complex, it's really built for very large organizations. So what 4557 and this checklist has done is try to narrow that down a little bit and simplify it. But the fact is that there are several areas that we really have to focus on. We got to protect your clients and yourself, right? We have to, and included in that are basic security steps, use of good security software, strong passwords, wireless networks, and being able to secure and protect not only those networks, but the data that we're storing, and regardless of where we're storing it at. So whether it's software somewhere else, we got to protect access to that, or whether it's data storage that we manage and own, ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of other things that, and I'm just going to go through this quickly. There's a lot we can talk about here, and we want to talk to you guys. So please take our number. Happy to talk to you about any of this in detail. But when you read it and they talk about being on guard, what they're really saying is that education, right? And Sam, what was that number of folks that were already educating in the survey?
41%. 41%.
So we as a group have a ways to go on this, but being able to spot data theft and phishing type scams, being able to know how to be safe on the internet, all that's an educational process that we need to go through. And then being able to understand what your reporting requirements are, and what would I do if it really did happen to me, right? I will throw out right now, tabletop exercises are awesome for that, right? Take a scenario you read about, pretend it just happened to your company, do a brown bagger and talk about how would we get out of this? What would happen if this happened to us? And that will be a huge help to help you with those WISP, the written information security policies, as well as implement things that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And then, of course, trying to comply with all the FTC safeguard rules, understanding what they really are, creating a checklist for that plan, and really understanding how your technology systems need to support that plan for yourselves. And then, of course, detecting and managing any kind of system failures as well. And we're going to talk some more about those things as we move forward.
Yeah. And so I think I know we went through that pretty quickly. We are going to share these handouts that are available right here, so you can have them, review them internally, reach out to us if you have questions or want to talk about your own setup. But we'll jump into poll question number 2 while we're here, and while we've been talking about things like phishing, because I think that's where we're going next, is more on that first line of defense. And so we've talked to a ton of clients and gotten mixed reports from them on whether or not they accept email attachments. So I think that's what we're asking here. So yes, as you accept them, no, as you send them back and say, use the secure portal we taught you to use, or sometimes it mean you make some exceptions.
Right. Yeah. I think this is a really insightful question. It seems simple, but how are you really communicating with your clients, right? And how do you move things back and forth? And what do you think your clients feel is acceptable or not? So we'll let that, I think we got it.
There it is. Boom.
Yeah.
Yep. So it looks like 55% do accept email attachments. 36% are sometimes, 9% are no. their nose.
Um,
So I think that the question really, Wes, is less about the attachments, more about like where you were going with how we communicate with clients, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of not only educating ourselves, but also educating our clients, right? Asking someone to simply attach a document to their email and send it to you. We're going to talk some more here in a few minutes about why you might not really want to do that and what it might mean if you are. We like the idea of portals and secure portals where someone has to log in, but it's also not all that convenient. So encrypted email is helpful, and it does meet a lot of the regulations in terms of transmitting private information over public medias like the internet. Okay. There are some things that we think you can do to really help protect your firm today. So let me kind of walk through those. Please, guys, again, if there's any questions, pop them into the question section here of the Zoom, and we'll try to answer them as we go. File storage, right? So are you backing things up? If you are they off-site? And I'd like to remind everybody, make sure you know what the rules are around accessing those backups. That's terribly important. You want to be able to have multiple versions of those backups that are there for a fairly long period of time. And the reason that's so important is if ransomware does hit and they do encrypt files, your backup software is just simply going to back those up. So you may have to go back several versions to get your actual data, okay? Password storage, use a trusted tool. It's kind of interesting. I personally use LastPass, and I know it's been in the news lately that they have been hacked. Pardon me, but no actual data was stolen, and so it's important to understand your vendors and how they're storing things. The reason no passwords were stolen is because they were input into their system as encrypted, and the only one with the keys to decrypt those passwords is you, the user. LastPass doesn't have it. So while they may have been able to crack through LastPass, they still, whatever data they stole, they're not going to decrypt it, is the point. You need to get those passwords out of spreadsheets, out of Word documents, wherever they might be today. And above all, please stop sharing them with everybody. If you are worried about using something like LastPass, you can turn on multi-factor authentication to that password vault, okay? And if you're worried about it, if you read that your vendor has been, hacked, or you're worried about it, or you want to do it, like all things, change your master password. Your master password is what lets you into the system to look at all your passwords. So by changing that master password, even if they stole that master password, if you change it on a fairly regular basis, you're good.
And have multi-factor, to your point. Change it and have multi-factor.
Yeah, in fact, my LastPass I have set up to my Microsoft Authenticator, and my Microsoft Authenticator requires bio, my fingerprint, to even get into my multi-factor authenticator. So think of those things all the way through, right? Education, I mentioned this a second ago. I can't tell you how important it is to talk to your clients about what your security processes are and what you're doing to help de-risk not only your business, but your clients and the amount of private information you store for them, right? For example, banks will tell us that they'll never email you and ask you for your personal information, right? So what is your process? How do you communicate with your clients, and educating them in a preemptive strike to say, hey, we're never going to do X, or this is how we do things, is extremely helpful in helping to educate your clients. Email, we strongly suggest that you use some kind of a email encryption tool to communicate with your clients. Now, that doesn't necessarily help once it lands on your client's computer, right? Encrypted email protects it end to end. So if someone's watching your network or your client's network, it's not easily stolen, okay? It's an extra layer. It's a measure that you need to take. And you need to define your policies about what and how long, right, that email should be accepted. So if you send something encrypted, there should be a time frame around it that they need to open it, okay? Yeah, hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I'm sure we've all seen that, right? When we respond to multi-factor authentication, you have X number of seconds or minutes to respond. So it's important to let that expire, which means nobody can open it at that point. So protecting your network really means protecting access to data. Let me ask, well, I'd love to see a show of hands. Can't do that. So when you stop and think about your network today, Sam already mentioned, many of us don't have to worry just about the four walls in our office, but also the four walls at home of all of our employees. So that network has really expanded dramatically, right? And so what you want to do is protect access to all things related to your business, meaning data and applications. So utilize things like VPN tools can be very helpful. I want to point out public VPNs may not be all that helpful. Private VPNs with your providers are much better.
And then we have quite a bit more to cover, but I would love for you to touch on the story that you have that is around making access to archived material time bound. So client data.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point is we have to archive certain data and hold data in a certain amount of time, right? So if you're holding data for old clients, right, you have to hold that data for X amount of time, whatever your regulations are. But I would not go beyond that. The other key thing that you need to do is make sure in your software, your third-party software. So let's just pretend it's a CRM for a minute. The story that I want to relate to you is this. In a CRM, the story goes that older clients were left in the CRM, no longer clients. And that CRM software had been hacked. The old clients ended up getting notified that their private information had been breached, right? Even though they weren't a client of this provider any longer. That was really bad. And that turned out to have numerous lawsuits over it. So when you're offboarding a client, secure the information, hang on to it for as long as you need to, then get rid of it, and make sure that you've deactivated those clients in any kind of third-party software. Is that the story, Sam, you were looking for?
That is the one. Yep, perfect. Thank you for driving that point home.
Absolutely. We'll move on to and I apologize. I know we have a lot to cover here today, so Sam's keeping me on good track. Ransomware attacks. There's a couple of things that I want to set up here, and Mandy's going to share a story with you. But the fact of the matter is, bad actors, once they're into your system, you don't know it. You won't know it. On average, 228 days, they're in your system. And what they're doing is they're really learning what your processes are, how you're communicating, what you're doing, and what your protections are that are in place. So just keep that in mind, right? That 6,000 victims of ransomware daily, right? So it's pervasive, it's complex, and you need to understand what kind of things can happen. Mandy, let you jump in and talk about that.
Absolutely. A couple of weeks back, I was working with a potential client who was interested in our hosting platform. The next day, I got an email from this client asking me to click on an attachment to view the completed information. So I responded back to him, letting him know that due to our cybersecurity policies that I'm not allowed to click on attachments in emails. Is there an additional way that he can send me the information to view? About 10 minutes later, I get another email from this guy letting me know that the link was secure, that I need to go ahead and just click on the link, enter my email and password, and all the information I need is going to be there. Well, because I've been trained through our cybersecurity awareness training program we have at Swizznet, I knew that this was not legit. So I called him up, and sure enough, he had been hacked, and his email, this email went out to everybody in his contacts that he had talked to over the last couple of months. But not only did they send out the original email, but they set up a rule so that if somebody responded to this email, that it would automatically delete, so he wouldn't see the response come in, and then it would automatically generate another email back out to the sender. The poor guy spent his entire day working on this, and then in the end had to email all of his clients and let them know that his email had been hacked and there had been a breach in the system. So it's pretty scary, and it all came from a phishing email.
And the reason for that is, based on all of the research, it's so much faster and cheaper to hack a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's faster and cheaper to do that than to try to go through networks and firewalls to get to the data, when you can just stage one of these attacks that seems so simple, that ultimately could end up compromising credentials for all of your contacts, not just your firm. So that's where it gets really scary. And things like phishing and spoofing and other means of social engineering are just so prevalent these days. I think the most recent research has shown that over 80% of data breaches are a result of human error through one of these social engineering attacks that are often put forth via email. And so that's why going back to MFA, I would drive it home. MFA is so important. If your credentials do get stolen through something like this, if you have MFA on, at least you'll have a heads up. And so what we're also seeing is these attacks are growing in sophistication. Wes would say that the Nigerian prince has grown up, right? That's classic. So bottom line is, if it feels fishy, it probably is. And so whenever I do see phishing emails like these, Mandy, thank you for these examples. I can't help but to recall a conversation that I had with the controller of a mid-sized construction company some number of months ago. She and I were talking about people being the first line of defense, and about how important it was for employees to be cybersecurity aware. And she said, I kid you not, she said to me, my team is incredibly aware. They forward me everything they think is spam or phishing and ask me to let them know if it's safe. So here we had the controller of this mid-sized construction company that's supposed to be, driving that company's financial success, who's effectively serving as the human spam filter. I can't imagine how much time she spent every day, manually responding to her employees saying, this is a good one, this is a bad one. When 45 minutes of training a year could help them to identify those phishing attempts themselves, Mandy, just like you did with that email that came from that client.
Yeah, a couple of things to be aware when an email comes in. If it says like "dear friend" on it, that's a pretty good indication that somebody is a bad actor. Or if you weren't expecting an email from somebody that includes an attachment, pretty good indication. Or if they're urgently trying to get you to click on something. Those are the kinds of emails that you really want to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at things like the domain of the sender, right? Because like we see in our training all of the time, sometimes these domains will look legit, but there's something about it that just isn't. So that's why that awareness training can be just so valuable for an organization.
It really is.
I know I went backwards on that slide, so we'll jump forward to this one. Wes, do you want to talk about the nature of a social engineering attack?
Yeah, I do. First of all, social engineering attack is all about manipulation of our human behaviors, right? If someone sticks their hand out to shake your hand, what do you normally do? You stick your hand out there to do that, right? It's just human behavior. That's what we're going to do. Someone asks you a question, typically you answer it. The easiest way to get information from you is to exploit that typical human behavior. One of the easiest things that we see happening is that on social media, we post a ton of information out there, all of us, whether we mean to or not, right? It's not this idea of one and done on these attacks. It is absolutely multi-layered and it's indirect. So for example, someone may target, my son or my son's wife to get information about me, believe it or not. Same for everyone out there. If they can get hold of that social network, they will learn a lot about you. Metadata is really important and it's all over the place about ourselves and about our businesses. As we mentioned, these attacks are really becoming very sophisticated and are growing in size, in just sheer number of attacks. I want to point out, how many of you think you've looked at Zillow or looked at some of the things out there on the internet about our homes, or maybe you're looking to buy a new home or sell your home? I want you to think about the information just contained that you yourself didn't put out there. You can find out how much someone paid for their house, right? If you have their address, you can identify how much someone can actually afford, kind of what their bracket is in terms of income, and a few extra searches based upon some of that other information. You can find out, things like work history and titles and just way too much information, and it's way too easy. So the point of this is these engineering attacks, they investigate, they're going to send something out that tries to hook you into giving away some critical piece of information. Then they figure out what that play is going to be and how they're going to exploit it, and then they put that into play. The point is, we cannot necessarily prevent these attacks. We should take that as a given. What we can do is control our own behavior and put in place equally sophisticated software to help understand when an attack maybe is happening. So we're going to go into more detail on this, but attacks also have behavior around them. So we've got another poll question for you. Do you enroll all your employees in cybersecurity training? So we'll give that a second. If not, we strongly suggest you should.
Absolutely. First line of defense, we'll keep saying it. And I love that you made the point that we can't necessarily avoid an attack. And I know that I've argued with you quite a bit about that, but ultimately you're right. 6,000 attacks a day, one every 14 seconds. We can't avoid it. It's what we do to prevent it on the front end that ultimately is going to make a difference. And that's going to extend beyond sophisticated software, and it's going to extend into multi-factor and employee awareness training.
Well, just stop and think about all the attacks we read about that we have absolutely no control over.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. So there we go.
Perfect.
Oh man, 50-50. Look at that. So 50-50, and that is actually really consistent again with the survey that we ran a couple of months ago across all of our hundreds of accountants, it was about 41%. So really similar results there.
So I want to talk a minute about some of these malware attacks and what that really means and what a phishing attack leads to. So phishing attack is, again, meant to gather information, right? Get you to give them something, whether it's your credentials or other information. But what happens after that? So what really is malware? Malware is nothing more than either programs that are intended to do something really bad, right? Gather more information, key loggers, that type of stuff, and or execute programs that are already in your computer to do something you don't want it to do, okay? Like encryption, right? So all malware really comes down to is that it is software, right? And it has to either be installed or invoked to do whatever bad things it wants to do, okay? So in other words, everything that happens in your computer leaves a footprint, including malware. Think of it as a fingerprint or a footprint. I'm sure many of us have seen the crime show Snapped or whatever it is on TV that, we gather evidence, we look at the clues, and it leads to what's going on. Well, software is the same way, and so is malware. It leaves clues behind. And good software that is proactively looking at those behaviors and patterns of programs within your computer can stop those programs from doing any harm before they really get going. So in other words, you can't just start encrypting files. You have to actually set that up. And watching those patterns within that computer system alert us. So it's no longer just about a signature or a file that looks like X. It's about patterns and activity within your computer. And the better software can understand that, figure it out, and stop it. So you can't stop it from coming down and getting in your system per se. That's the attack. But we can stop it from doing anything major in your system with the right software.
That's absolutely right. So we've talked about proactive threat hunting a little bit. We've talked about multi-factor. We've talked about education, and we've talked about malware and ransomware. But there's still a looming threat outside of systems and attacks, and that's people. Recently, we had a client migrate off of one accounting software and onto another. And when they did that, they took their books in-house. So they were no longer hosting it on our platform, is what I mean by in-house. Not necessarily the accounting function, but the software itself. So they took it off of our platform where we were managing backups and security and redundancy and things like that. And when they took it in-house, they did not do their diligence in setting up redundant offsite backups. And unfortunately, their bookkeeper deleted their financial data on their way out the door. There's no record of any of their financial data at this point in QuickBooks or their prior software, because they'd been gone from us for a number of months. So, per our SOC, our requirements, we had deleted all of their data and backups. And all of this happened 3 weeks before their audit, and they had no way to produce anything from 2022. So just, it really illustrates the critical need for maintaining things like those redundant offsite backups, and not be naive to the fact that sometimes threats can come from inside, which is really scary. So it's not always about the technology. It can be about the people.
Yeah. So some of you are probably going, wow, that sounds really bad and scary, but there are things we can do to help mitigate that risk by simply minimizing access and understanding what controls I can put in place. So, for example, yes, we need to be able to use the software on our systems and execute and add things and change things, but not necessarily delete everything that's out there. So limiting access or privilege access, right? Instead of saying Wes has access to everything so he can get his job done, it's more a matter of Wes has access to nothing except these very specific things that I need him to do on the system. And especially, as Mandy, you mentioned at the top, outsourcing. That's where it's really critical to limit what's going on there. And then, of course, always limit access to your backups, direct access to your backups.
Yeah, and I think all of those things are really tips for being a future forward thinking firm and thinking, you know, mitigating potential risks instead of dealing with them on the backside. And so that brings us to best practice implementation.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we understand multi-factor authentication. There's the old multi-factor authentication of years past, meaning you get a text and it's done and that's it, versus some of the intelligent multi-factor authentication that's out there today. And what that means is if I approve an authorization from my computer in Kansas and 10 minutes later another one comes through from New York, something's wrong, right? That can't physically happen. So intelligent multi-factor authentication is a big plus, and depending upon what you use, so like Microsoft uses that if we put those policies in place for it. You really should turn on multi-factor everywhere you absolutely can. And that goes for your personal side as well as everything, right, in your business. If your software does not provide multi-factor authentication, I'd strongly suggest finding a way to either get that in place by having another layer that lets you access that software or change the software, right? You really need that. Protecting the device you're using. I've already mentioned I use biometrics on my Authenticator app. And the reason that's so important is how many times do you get that multi-factor authentication on an app and you just say approve? You just push that button, right? So making that extra step of having to put your finger on there and read your fingerprint maybe gives you time to pause and say, why am I getting this? Right? Did I ask for this? And we've seen numerous stories where someone has been hacked, and they've given away their credentials, they had multi-factor authentication, and the bad actor asked for that authentication to come through, and they just approved it. They just said, okay.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Wes, that it's not just you, right? It's everyone in our organization because it's a part of our policy. And so, and that's part of future-proofing a firm is defining your policies as an organization and then enforcing those. And so that's, right. I think that's a really important point that we might not have talked about yet.
Yeah, actually, you hit on the key point maybe for anyone to take away today. It's not just what policies you have, but are you enforcing those policies? That's really important.
For sure.
Okay.
We've got a couple minutes left, so we'll zoom through these last few.
Yeah. The key to this slide really that we want to bring home to everybody is understand your environment, what your threat perimeter is. Sam already mentioned, talked about it before. It's no longer just your office, right? It's beyond just that firewall. You still need it. You need it in your office, and it needs to be configured properly. I would even suggest you need one at home, but having next-gen antivirus and protective and reactive software in place that matches your policies is a must. And whatever software you have needs to go well beyond just signature-based antivirus to actual behavioral type acknowledgement of what's happening. So I don't know if this is the last poll or not, but next to last, what are you using today? Are you using next-gen antivirus? And while you do that, I'm sorry, Sam, did you want to jump in?
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit for sake of time and talk a little bit about how you might be able to ramp up your security that you already have in place today. And keep in mind that you don't have to be a super IT security specialist to get that done. While you're answering that,
we'll keep going. We'll let the poll close. And again, really consistent with what we gathered from our survey. 44% said yes, and we had 41% on ours. So within just a couple of points.
So based upon the surveys and the answers coming back, Mandy, Sam, the whole team is really good at trying to help you understand some of these things. So please give us a call. We can help you get through that. Sam, there's a question out there about, will we make this slideshow available? So you might ask that or answer that on the chat if you don't mind. Partnership, it's really important to partner not only with an IT person or team that really understands security, but also understands your business. I think that's really critical to making that happen. If you don't mind, let's jump on to the next slide. I think it's really a hallmark for our company that we want to listen to our clients and try to understand what it is that they want and are asking for. And so we're trying to listen to that. If you go ahead and hit the button, I think Liz has a great quote up here. When we became accountants, we didn't realize we were going to have to be IT specialists as well, right? And as we mentioned before, it wasn't all that complex in the beginning, but it's getting there now, right? Evidence of that last question, right? What the heck is next gen software? So we listened to you. We've tried to take your advice, and when it comes to cybersecurity, we think you need that easy button, right? Something fairly easy, scalable, reliable, effective, and most importantly, cost efficient to really help protect your systems. So let's go ahead and jump to our next slide. What we've done is we've simplified this dramatically for you. It doesn't mean that these are simple packages. There is a lot underneath these packages and a lot of technology to help protect you. So really what we want to do is kind of give you an idea of what you can be doing, and we will be more than happy to walk you through it. Mandy's great at getting you to understand all the components of this. Mandy, anything you want to jump in and make a comment on there?
No. When we worked on these packages, I will just say that from talking to everybody, so many accountants were like, I want to be secure. It's just so overwhelming. I don't know where to start. I don't even know what to do first. So taking all that feedback and taking the IRS 4557 regulations and coming up with a good starting point for our firms that are wanting to do something to make sure that their data and their clients' data is secure, but just don't know where to start.
Right.
And I know we started late. Do we have just a little house cleanup that we have to do in the last 30 seconds here before the webinar ends automatically?
We did have one more poll question here. And basically, would you like to learn about Swiznet's EDR solution? What's EDR? Did I miss that?
Yep. No, you didn't. I was sitting here going, wait a minute, where did that come from? So Sam, you want to jump in?
So it's that endpoint detection and response. So when we talk about the easy button, these are the 3 packages that we put together, and we'd love to talk with you about it. I know we didn't get to talk about this in as much detail as we talked about the other stuff, which arguably was more important, right? Just actionable steps that you can take to start to future-proof your firm. If you want to learn more about our endpoint detection and response, this is that next-gen antivirus and employee training, the cybersecurity awareness training, 2 really easy to implement actionable things for your firm. Let us know. We'll be happy to talk with you about that.
Very good. Well, if we don't have anything else, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Wes, Sam, and Mandy for being here and for presenting. Thanks for everybody for taking an hour or so out of your day to come and learn a little about technology and what we all need to be doing with our businesses. I know I have a checklist of things now. Thanks a lot, Wes.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all. Have a
Bye.
great week.
Bye-bye.